Hi guys, I'm Kate Smithers. I'm from the University of Newcastle and I'm in my third year of my PhD now. In Australia, we basically have 3 to 4 years to finish, so I'm in the end sort of stages, writing up, finishing up my data analysis and hopefully submitting my thesis by the end of the year, so it's exciting. When I first started my PhD, you hear about this thing called NVIVO, and some supervisors like NVIVO, some don't. Some prefer you to do your data analysis by hand. And I really wanted to explore NVIVO a bit more before I started using it for data analysis, as it's really hard to know if you actually want to use it if you don't really know how it works and the functions of it. And then I thought, what's a good way to test NVIVO out before I start my data analysis? And I actually came across, I don't know where, somebody had been using it for literature reviews. And I had a further search around the internet, and there is a lot of videos that explain how you might do the functional parts of the literature review, but I found that there wasn't really that many that explained the more how and why. So a lot of videos will show you the basic functions of NVIVO and how they might translate to a literature review, but for me it didn't really explain what sort of things you would code that might help you in the future for a literature review. And I have a blog, it's adventuresinaphd.wordpress.com. I'll probably put a link down the bottom in the description and also on the down here for you, in case you want to look at it. And I have a Twitter. Follow me on Twitter if you like. And I posted on my blog, maybe, I think it might have been about a year ago now, my how and why of the literature review, where I explained a little bit more how I've been using the tools, and that blog post was very popular. At the time I thought that's enough, people can sort of go away and do what they want with NVIVO using those tools that I've given them. But recently, in a different role here at the university, I've been a student peer advisor, and one of my good friends actually came to me asking for help on how to do a literature review in NVIVO. And when I saw what she had done, I realized that perhaps this requires a bit more explanation than I had originally given in the blog post, and I will explain that further in the video. But I'm hoping today to show you my NVIVO file and show you all the different ways that I've used NVIVO throughout the lifetime of my PhD, not just for data analysis. So I'm hoping that it will show you ways that you can use NVIVO. Something I want to emphasize is that you don't have to use NVIVO the same way I do, and everything I'm doing, in fact, is experimental myself. I'm learning how to use this program as I go, and I'm learning the things that I like or that I don't like. So you may see in this video, there's things that I say, oh, I don't use that anymore, or this is in the wrong place. But for me, I'm sort of rolling with the uncertainty of it and rolling with the not knowing fully where I'm going. So if there are things that you think, oh, I would have filed that under a different part or something like that, please don't leave me a comment saying that I've put it under the wrong heading or something like that. Usually I know that it's under the wrong heading. I've just left it there because that's where I originally put it and I know that it's there. That will hopefully make sense a little bit later. But as I said, NVIVO has been such a learning journey for me. So please do not take what I've doing as 100% the only way to do it. There are many ways that you could use NVIVO for a literature review or in your project. I'm hoping that people today will take the video and sort of just take what I am doing and maybe add it to what they're doing. You don't have to 100% copy me, not at all. I'm not asking people to do that. Alright, so we might just jump in. First of all, I would like to say I'm going to be using NVIVO for Mac. So there are some differences in NVIVO for Mac and NVIVO for Windows, mainly in the presentation of things. For some reason in the Mac version they're called different things, and the Windows version actually has a lot more features. So keep that in mind as we go through. I will hopefully provide you with the alternate names, so it might help you if you're on a Windows, but if not, the YouTube videos on the NVIVO channel are really useful for learning how to use NVIVO. So if you get stuck with anything, put it in the search bar and you may find an NVIVO QSR video which will really help you with whatever function you're stuck on. One more thing, just quickly before we get into it, I just want to reiterate that NVIVO is a data management tool. It is not going to do your analysis for you, and as such, it won't do your literature review for you. A lot of how to use NVIVO is knowing what you want to put into it, what codes you think are relevant, what themes you already know from your data. So please keep that in mind as we go throughout. NVIVO really does not do your analysis for you. It is a useful tool to help speed up locating data and sorting your data, but really at the end of the day, you are the driver, and the driver has to know where you're going. So NVIVO is just sort of the tool that will get you there, but it will not help you with the sort of hard thinking work that you actually have to do in analysis.
I currently have my EndNote file open here. I thought I would walk you through how you can export your references from EndNote and put them into NVIVO really easily. So for this example, I'm just going to use one reference, but if you wanted to do your whole library, you can just click at the top, go all the way down, holding down Shift and select all. But for the purpose of this example, I'm just going to export one. So if you wanted to do your whole library, just do exactly what I just did. Now I'll just show you for the one. So I have decided to use one reference, which I already have coded in NVIVO, but for the sake of this example, I'm just going to show you how to export it. So make sure you have whichever references selected that you'd like to export. Then you go File, Export. And now also, I would just like to say here, I have made my cursor bigger for you guys, so hopefully you'll be able to follow what I'm doing. And with every mouse click, there will be a circle around what I have clicked. All right, so now you need to choose somewhere to save it. I just choose my desktop, so it's easy, and EndNote Feb 2020 converted is fine. You just need to be able to find it again. So now the file type has to be XML, and then you just press save, and it should be on your desktop here. See, there it is on mine. Now we need to open up NVIVO. So I am going with an understanding that perhaps you already have looked in NVIVO before, but I will try to do this as slowly and as clearly as possible. NVIVO is a tool which has many different options within it, so I would recommend starting slow and learning the features as you go. Don't try and jump full feet in, because you'll end up overwhelmed. So I'm going to open my NVIVO. As you can see here, I have my project in the recent projects, but you would create a new project if this was new. So opening it, sorry, this may take some time. My computer is not the fastest. Now, here is just a note. I actually have my NVIVO password protected, just an extra layer of security for my participants, as my audio recordings are in there. So I put my password in, open. So my NVIVO is kept behind a password protected computer, but it is also password protected itself. All right, so we have here, it opens up to basically what I was in last, so in my articles folder here, but I will just quickly walk you through NVIVO. So up the top here, we have our ribbon. It's very similar to the ribbon in Microsoft Word. So if you're familiar with Microsoft Word, it's sort of similar. You have different little menu options here, and then they're also up here as well. I tend to just use the ribbon rather than these menu options. And in some cases, it is quicker to learn the keyboard shortcuts, so that is an option as well. So when you open your new project, it should appear sort of like this. Everything will be empty. Down the side here, we have files, file classifications, externals. Then we have codes with nodes underneath them. So in NVIVO for Windows, under the code section, you will have something extra called relationships and relationships types. So that's not a feature on Mac. unfortunately, so I do not use it. On the NVIVO website, there is a great article about how to use that relationships feature for your literature review. So then we have our cases, case classifications, and then notes. So on the Windows, again, this is going to look slightly different. So here I have memos, annotations, and then memo links, whereas on the Windows version, you will also have framework matrices, and it will say see also links, not memo links. Then the search basically is where you can save any outputs, searches that you have, queries. And again, this is going to look slightly different on the Windows version, but not too much. And then maps, this is where you can have your mind maps that NVIVO can make for you. And then on the Windows version down here, there will also be output. So as I said, there are some slight differences. The functionality is not so different, but slight differences. I'll start by importing that reference that we just exported from EndNote. So I'm assuming in this video that you are sort of at the start of your project. So I'm going to go through the literature review first, as that will be the thing that you would start with in your project. So I will do the literature review, and then I'll sort of talk you through my data collection and what I did during data collection and transcription very, very briefly. And then I'll move on to how I've sort of used NVIVO for my own data. All right, so under my files here, I actually have some folders set up. This is so that my articles and my project data are separate. This is a decision I made at the very start. So if you're going to do it, I'd recommend doing it now at the start while it's easy to sort through your documents. So I have a folder for articles. I have a folder for books. Not that I have too many books. It tends to be book chapters that I have borrowed from the library and then scanned and emailed to myself, as there aren't too many books that you can get full copies of online. Data analysis scans, I'll explain that a bit later. Drawings, which is my data. Field notes, which is also my data. Interviews, data again. And then I also have a section for interesting theses that I like. This isn't too big. I think I have about 5 in there. It's mainly just others that refer to the type of tourism that my thesis is about, which isn't very common. So I have them in there just for the ability to find them again easier. As I said, I think at the start of this video, I see this as a data management tool. So rather than having all of these stored in folders on my computer, I have them stored in my NVIVO. So anything I want to be able to find easily again goes into NVIVO. So if you're like me and you're looking for something that will help keep your files organized, I would suggest NVIVO is a great option. I use it as a storage tool. All right, so let's jump into putting our reference from EndNote into our NVIVO. I'm going to go to Data. This is sometimes where I get a bit confused. I think it's in Create, but it's always in Data. Then we go Bibliographic Data, EndNote. And then we just have to find the file that we saved. Hopefully you can find where it is on your computer. We just click on it and press Open. All right, so now here you have a few options. I always sort by author and year, as it's much easier to remember an author and find it rather than finding a title. And I'm going to assign my files to single classification reference. So I'll explain this in a second, but I actually have all of my references for my literature review under a classification. So we just press next. It's going to ask us where to create it. And I am just going to click articles and then create externals. So externals are basically any EndNote reference you have that does not have a PDF attached will be created in externals, and I will show you that once we've gotten through this wizard. So we want to import the content, so file attachments, URLs, or figures. And if you want, you can create a memo from the abstract, keywords, and notes. So I personally don't use EndNote to store abstracts, keywords, and notes, but if you do this, go ahead and create a memo. So we press OK, and then it will come up with this. takes its time. Sorry, my computer is a bit slow. All right, so it has been created. It is, where is it? So it's been created here. I just move this across so you can see a bit. So when EndNote inserts it, it also includes the reference number. So in my EndNote library, this is reference 539. So that will be there. It doesn't really bother me. It may bother you, so you can, if you'd like, you can just press Get Info. So right click, press Get Info, wait for your spinning wheel, and you can, if you'd like, just delete it and press Done. All right. So now we have our article imported here. We can double click to open it. Sorry, I'll just move this back across. So hopefully you can see here, you do have options about how far you have your displays. So this changes as well. So that is your choice as well. You can play around with it and see what you feel like. All right, so here we have our article. It has been imported, and as you can see, it sort of looks pretty much exactly like any other PDF viewer. This is the way to import individual PDFs. So my preference of choice is to import individual PDFs rather than exporting from EndNote every time. When I first project, I exported from EndNote because it was super easy. What I do, and this is detailed in one of my blog posts as well, is I import my reference into EndNote and then put the PDF straight into NVIVO and work from there. So we'll walk you through how to do that now. It's really quite simple. So I just like to make sure that I have my articles folder clicked. This just means that I know for sure that it's going in the right place. Otherwise, sometimes it'll end up in just the broad files folder. So just treat these like folders on your computer. So if you saved it under files, it's going to be under the file folder, not in the subfolder. I hope that makes sense. So make sure you have your articles folder clicked. And if you need to create a new folder, just right click, new folder. Easy as that. All right, so articles. I'm just going to sort these by name quickly as I was looking for something else earlier. So we can sort them by name. We can sort them by the amount of nodes that they're coded to, and the amount of times that they're coded. So that's pretty fun. Also can sort by created by, sorry. And then really useful tool if you are researching with others is the created by option. And then there's a great color coding. As you can see, I did start to use it, and then I sort of went away from that a bit. So you do have the option to color code if you'd like. There is many colors to choose from, and I guess it depends on how your brain works if you want to color code or not. All right, so back to sorting by name. All right, now, so we go to the data tab, and make sure you have articles clicked. So we have articles clicked, PDF. It's going to open your files or where you last had a file open. I might just for ease do one of my last imported. So I just click it here, press import, and as easy as that. So then it will have the name of the PDF. So you can change this to whatever format you'd like for ease of importing. When I save them from the online database, I save them with the author's name and year. And then for your classification sheet, which I'll explain in a minute, you just want to press reference and press done. And there we have it. So before we jump into this, I am just going to explain the classification. So when we imported just before, it showed us a file classification and asked us if we wanted to assign it to reference, and we clicked yes. So when you import your references from EndNote, it will give you this option. And if you choose to do this, it's going to create a classification sheet, which mine is opening now. So the classification sheet is going to show you all of these attributes. So basically they are all imported from from EndNote. So you have all of the different fields which EndNote has. So access date, accession number, added to library, etc. Now I'm just going to delete some of these as I actually do not use them. So I'm going to delete author, all of these. So don't mind me. Just select delete. As for me, they are not useful. I absolutely do not use these. You can choose to keep whichever ones you want if you think access date will be important to you, or if you think the DOI may be important to you, feel free to keep them. All right, may take a bit of time, and then, okay, so again, I don't use these, delete. So now that we have those deleted, we can see the fields which I have created. So on your reference sheet, you can keep as many of the EndNote fields as you'd like. That's up to you. Or you can create new attributes. All right, so first I'll actually explain to you what the classification sheet is. So the classification sheet is, the way I look at it, it is basically like an Excel spreadsheet within your NVIVO document or file. So just scroll to the top here. So you can sort by name, which will have, depending on how you name your files, will have your authors, and then you can filter across the top here. So it's really useful, especially for people who rely on the Excel spreadsheet format for their literature review. You don't need to have one of these in Excel. You can have it in NVIVO, which I think is super handy. All right, so I have in my attributes focus of article, location, method, qual or quant, research field, theoretical framework, who, and year. So my focus of my article is a couple of words that really briefly summarize what the article may be about. The location is where it's located. So my PhD is about tourism, so there is actually a fair amount of different locations, and I wanted to be able to see or filter by country. Method, so this means I usually put like surveys or interviews or focus groups, that sort of thing. Qual or quant, so qualitative or quantitative research. I felt that this would be important for me in my literature review, but I actually haven't used this distinguishing feature yet, so we'll see. Research field, theoretical framework, who and year. So now if we go to the classification sheet, this is where it becomes really handy. If I want to find tourism papers which use a certain theoretical framework, I can go research field equal to tourism and press OK. And then it will show me all of the papers that I have assigned to tourism in my NVIVO file. Then if I want to choose the theoretical framework, I can just filter and say, how about we go Foucault? Press OK. And then you can see I've actually got 5 papers which fall into what I classify as the tourism field, which use Foucault as their theoretical framework. So you can see how this might be extremely useful for sorting different methods to discuss in your literature review, or perhaps even different papers that discuss different theoretical frameworks. There's so many different ways that you can use this, and you can really make it what you want it to be. So I'm just going to clear these filters. And I will just note here that you can probably see that some of mine say unassigned, and this is because I actually came to NVIVO probably about a year into my PhD. So there are some which I have not assigned yet. I am getting there slowly, working my way through. When I have minutes of time where I don't feel as focused, that's when I sort of go through and try and assign these, but it is a work in progress. All right, attributes. So if you wanted to add one of these as something different, you just go right click, new attribute. Then if your computer's like mine, it thinks about it for a while, and the more references you have, the longer this will take. All right, so then we can name it. So perhaps I might be interested in say the author's home country. So in a lot of the research that I read, sometimes people are going on overseas fieldwork and it's not necessarily where they're from. So author home country, and then we just keep the type at text, and we can add some here. So we might know, say Australia, United States, maybe UK. So we can just add some that we think might already be there. So we can just press done, and then that will be there. And if we load our classification sheet, it is over here. And they say unassigned because we have not assigned any of these articles yet. All right, so now I hear you asking, well, how do I assign an article? If we go back over here, which is our open items, we will click on the article which we just imported. So we can right click and press get info. So here again, we have the name, and this is where you can edit the name if you choose. You can edit the color. Then we have our classification reference. So here is where we begin to assign these things. So author home. So we might just scroll and have a look at where Mary is from. Okay, so we will say United States. And then the focus of the article. So I've read this before. We might say geographies of compassion. And then the location is Thailand. And as you can see, when I'm typing these in, it is automatically filling them in for me. Keep in mind that when you add a new attribute by typing it, it will add it to the list for the future. So that's another easy way to edit your attributes is in here. And there is also the option of not applicable. So if you aren't sure what field it might put into, you can just say not applicable. So some of my fields, I don't always use them. In a minute, I'm going to show you this who one. And I don't use it for everything. All right, so research field. I might put tourism as it's about volunteer tourism. Despite her working in anthropology, I would classify this as a tourism paper. So tourism and her theoretical framework. We might just put post-colonialism. And then who. So my who is actually only used for my tourism articles. I wanted a way to track how my the focus was of the different articles I was reading. So whether it was the tourist adults, tourist children, the home country children, the home community adults, or the organizations who send volunteers, or a mix of both. So I believe that this is an article, I've read this before, about volunteers and the organization. So I'm going to go volunteer and organization. Click that. And then the year is already filled in for me because it's from the EndNote data, so 2013. And then I just click done. You can, of course, over here in the classification sheet, you could scroll and find this article and then fill it in this way. But I choose not to do this as this classification sheet actually takes up quite a lot of memory and my computer slows down a lot if I have it open. So I only use it for specific filtering if I feel the need. All right, so we will close that. Again, this video isn't too much about the mechanics of NVIVO, but I thought I should probably just show you how to do a node. So you just right click and new top level node, just click it and it will create that top level for you. I'm just going to press cancel. If you want to do one underneath, you can just open it up, click on the actual code you want it underneath, new node, and then it's going to create the little sub node there, or child node, I guess they're called. And if you do right click and say development, I wanted that to be a top level node, you can just say move to top level and it will move it to be in the same line as these guys. And you can also, when you are coding, so say I'll just open this one, say I wanted to create a new code, just highlight whatever I wanted, code selection, and then I can press add new node and create a new node right in text there. And you can drag and drop as well over here, and your node's open to do that. You can drag and drop. So say I wanted to drag and drop this to tourism. I would just drag it there and it codes it at tourism. And then there's also a keyboard shortcut, which I like. I believe it's Command and then backslash, and it opens up this. And so here I can just start typing. So if I wasn't sure which codes had post-colonial, I can just type, and then you can see I have a whole bunch of different codes for post-colonialism. I can just choose the one that I want. So I use that one more often than not. And again, you can code it at a new node there. So this is actually a very handy box and I like it. So it's just Command and backslash. I believe that is a lot of the mechanics of coding. Again, there are many, many, many videos about how to code in NVIVO. Hi guys, so I'm currently in the editing process of the video. I've just noticed that in this next section where I'm talking about how I code the article, I have said a lot tag rather than code. So throughout this next section, I have been saying I've tagged it at, or this is a tag. Please keep in mind that as you watch this next section, every time I say tag, I actually mean coded to a node. I do apologize, it's so confusing when people switch terminology when you're not used to a program, but it just kept happening throughout this video, so I just thought I'd pop in here and let you know every time I say tag, I actually mean code or a node. All right, so now I'm going to show you or walk you through a little bit of how I might code a document. All right, so just going to open the one that I've already coded. So this is the same article here, I believe. I do have two for 2013. Oh, no, this one. All right, so this is an article that I've already coded. I just turn these off for now. So as you can see, it's the exact same as the one I just imported from EndNote. The only difference is I had already gone through the whole process. Now, when you open up a file, it will look like this. There will be no highlights and no stripes down the side here. What I like to do when I am coding is I like to look at the stripes that I am coding. So I click on coding stripes up here, all nodes coding, and then I press highlight as well, coding for all nodes. And this is a really good way to quickly review an article. You can just go scrolling through and look at where you've highlighted things. So I might just scroll through and go, nothing, 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 nothing. Okay, highlight it and stop and read my highlights. Very good way to review an article if you need to quickly. And it sort of functions the same way as you'd highlight on paper or highlight in your Adobe program, whatever you're currently doing. So this is why I love NVIVO, as it sort of combines all of the different ways that people do literature reviews. So highlighting on paper, Excel spreadsheets, and it just brings all of them together. All right, so we're going to look at how I've coded this article. But first, I might actually show you my codes and nodes that I currently have, just to make it a bit clearer. So over here in this bar, we can open our nodes tab. We have two folders, so I have a data analysis folder and a literature codes. I again made this decision just to make it really clear which sources of data were coming from my literature and which ones were coming from my actual data collected. I would suggest you also do this so you don't get confused. Right, so my literature codes. Again, I said at the start of the video, please do not judge me off the names that I have for some of these things. They are works in progress, and sometimes they're the ones I first created, and they may not actually be fully reflective of what is under that node. Now, somebody asked me, how did you come up with your nodes? I was very, very fortunate that I started using NVIVO about a year into my PhD, so I already had an idea of where my literature review might go. But if you're not sure, a really good way is to think of potential chapters. So I knew that I'd have a country context chapter, so I created a top level node for that. I knew that I'd be undertaking data analysis, so I had a node for that. Education specifically in my the country, methodology, which a lot of people would say that method falls under methodology, which is so true. My method will be in my methodology chapter, but I felt that these two were so kind of, the articles would be so different that I wanted to separate them. Philanthropy and development, my theoretical framework, which again should probably be under methodology, but it's not how I did it, so I'm just leaving it how I did it. Tourism and Zimbabwe research. So this is a tourism article, so we will probably open our tourism nodes here and have a look at them first. So you just click this little arrow and all of your subnodes will open up. So anytime there's a little arrow, it means that it has little subnodes underneath it. And again, this is a volunteer tourism, and I have a very specific volunteer tourism subnodes, as it was my very first focus of my literature review. My literature review has shifted since then, but that's fine. So in my tourism in particular, I knew that my literature review would probably focus a lot on tourism and the scope of the studies within my type of tourism and things like that. So one thing I did right from the very beginning was have a definition tab, as volunteer tourism is defined differently by different people sometimes, and a scope of studies tab. So for both of these, it's sort of giving me a cheats way of doing a literature review, which I'll explain in a second. And then I sort of made these as I went. So I didn't originally have the celebrity influence one here. It was only when I read an article about celebrity influence on volunteer tourism that I created this node. So you can create ones as you go. That is completely fine. Remember, it is a learning process. And as you create your nodes, you are beginning to think of themes. So I would suggest, if you don't know where your literature review is going, you just create nodes as you come along them in articles, and then it may become apparent, hey, I'm actually coding a lot under critiques, or I'm coding a lot under, say, happy poor or something like that, or I'm not coding anything under not being a tourist, so maybe it's not so important to the studies. So it's a good way to be able to sort of look at what things you're actually coding a lot. But yes, we will get to that. All right, so I decided to walk you through this article to show you how I code. So I can sort of explain a little bit about why I might code things. As somebody I know, they did come to me and they said, I think I'm coding wrong. Like, I'm trying to do my literature review in NVIVO, but I've ended up highlighting the whole document. And it wasn't until I sort of sat down and walked her through how I code articles that I realized my thinking process might be a bit different to the way that you would imagine if I just told you go and code some articles in NVIVO. All right, so I am going to just scroll through this and explain why I coded the way I did. Again, there is no right or wrong answer with NVIVO. Go for it, do what you would like. But this is how I do it. So all right, so this first section here, you can see I have it coded, and I have it coded at exotic and volunteer tourism. So for me, all of the sub nodes of volunteer tourism, they have this tick, so it's aggregate coding from child nodes, meaning if I opened the volunteer tourism, it shows me literally everything that is coded underneath it. That's my option. So you'll see when I have coded under volunteer tourism a subnode, it will say volunteer tourism and exotic, but that is a choice you can make. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, please just go to the NVIVO help files and it will explain it. All right, so I have this one coded as exotic because I wanted to have examples of other people's studies where participants had described certain things as exotic. So here it says, if I was used to traveling, I would have gone to India, then I would go to Africa. So that's sort of exotifying Africa and saying that you need sort of practice in exotic locations before you go there. So that is why I've done this. It's an example of how other people are writing about their participant statements, but it's also an example of the exotification. And so I just wanted a really clear statement about what the exotification looks like. So then scrolling again. So here it is, sorry, I am just scrolling through these here. So I might just try and get that. I think we have enough room. Yeah, so now I don't have to scroll. So this one here is tagged at or coded at definition. So as I said, I wanted to have a really clear looking and being able to open everything that was coded under definition. And so I was coding numbers. So it's really hard to find online the amount of people who volunteer. And a lot of, you'll see this article even doesn't have a reference for this number. So I was collecting references which had a number in them of the amount of tourists, just so that I had it for the future if I wanted to be able to quote a number. Again, this is pretty simple. It's a definition code, as we can see here. Most volunteer tourists come from Western countries. Again, that was just so that I could have a really clear summary of the types of people who were volunteer tourists and the amount. I just wanted to be able to open a node and see what everybody is saying about who the tourists are and what they're doing. Right, so here, see, this is where I tell you please don't judge me, because this actually has a Q in it. It's spelt wrong. It says neocolonial, and I have tagged this as neocolonial and neoliberalism. So the reason I did this was because the way I look at my NVIVO is a way to flag things for the future. So I'm not coding every time this paper talks about capitalism, and I'm not coding every time this paper talks about neocolonization or colonization. Here it's a flag. Hey, look, this person is talking about volunteer tourism and the way that it reflects the expansion of neoliberalism, which means that if I had this neocolonial code open, I'd be able to see, hey, this person talks about it this way. So it's more like a flag for future follow-up if I wanted to. I'm not coding every single sentence that has neoliberalism in it. Yeah, so that's an important distinguisher. I think that a lot of the videos don't actually talk about is that I would like to be able to find things in the future. This isn't about coding every sentence. It's about coding things that are going to allow you in the future to be able to find the article that has the same argument as what you're looking for. So we keep scrolling. So you'll see I haven't actually highlighted any different any definitions of neoliberalism or anything, and they talk about that there. Because my logic is, if I'm interested in neoliberalism and volunteer tourism, I can find it through the sentence that I have coded. I can click on it and I can read it in detail in the article if I choose to. It's just a flagging system. It's not every sentence. All right, so here I have coded it at celebrity influence and post-colonial discussions. So they're pretty self-explanatory tags. So this person has started talking about post-colonialism and also, or talking in a manner that reflects the fact that they understand the field of post-colonialism, and they're talking about celebrity influence. So again, I've sort of just highlighted what they're saying they'll do so that I can flag it for follow-up in the future if I want to. All right, so here we have it tagged at development. So that's actually under tourism itself here, not volunteer tourism, but that doesn't matter. So these concerns build upon the broader concern with the ethics of development, blah, blah, blah. So I've just tagged that there so that I know that this article is also talking about development and volunteer tourism. And then here we again have it tagged at development, capitalism, and donors. And then you'll see here, I actually haven't coded anything in the middle here, particularly in the methodological context, because I wasn't using, and I knew I wasn't going to use this paper as a paper about methodology, so I didn't code it. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't related to me. It's not in the same continent. I'm doing my research. So yeah, and I have it filed under ethnography. So if I want to find it later, I will be able to find it. So if you know that it's not really relevant to what you're doing, or might not be on the same continent or something like that, or in the same country, you don't need to code it for methodology. Just code it for the things you're going to want to use it for. All right, so here we have a couple of different codes. So this first sentence is coded at images of Africa. So a big thing for my study is this image of Africa and the way that everybody sees it as one continent without countries, like that image of barren countries, no cities, that sort of thing. So I have highlighted places where people have sort of contributed to this idea so I can get a broader picture of what this idea looks like. Then again, I've coded exotic and motivations. So one thing at the start, I wasn't sure if I'd be interested in why people go overseas and volunteer, so I had a node for motivations. Now it's not so relevant for my study, but it's still useful. Say in the future, if I wanted to write an article about motivations for why people travel, I have that there. Right, scrolling through. Again, this is coded at the images of Africa, so it talks about the homogeneous category of Africa, the way that people talk about that, and then again, whole page not coded. Here we go. Theorizing childhood, so the different ways that third world children are represented, and see here, I don't actually have the rest of this highlighted. I know that I will be able to find this later if I need to, because this sentence really shows what the rest of the paragraph is going to say. Then again, we have some more coding. So hopefully you're getting the idea that I don't actually code everything in the document. I'm not coding everything that's related to neoliberalism. I'm not coding everything that's related to motivations of tourists. I'm just coding things to flag for future follow-up. And hopefully I can show you what I mean by this. So if we just scroll, say, up to, let's do celebrity influence. On the side here, if you're interested in seeing what you have coded under celebrity influence, you can just click the code, double click, sorry, and it's going to open your node and show you everything that you have coded. So we can see how this might be very useful to get a sense of the different articles and what your articles are saying, and move towards a synthesis rather than a summary. So by being able to see what everybody is saying, you're going to get a broader picture of what's happening and be able to figure out the connections between them and the way that you want to use them. So say, for example, we can see here, this one's talking about a very specific incident that bring back our girls, hashtag. This one's talking about more broadly about the image. This one's talking about a specific example of Prince William and Prince Harry. And this one is from the article that we just were reading, I believe. And it talks about how celebrity activism, etc., is related to volunteer tourism. So you can see it's actually kind of a little bit broad under here what all of these different codes are saying, but it forms an overall picture of what I might like to say about the celebrity influence on the way that we see what is called sometimes the third world. That's not what I would call it, maybe majority world. Yeah, so hopefully that has given you a bit of an idea of why I code things. So we might just close this node. So over here, you can just press that close button. And I might walk you a little bit through some of my codes. So just close these articles just to save my computer's memory. So under the tourism here, I did say that I found that the definition code and the scope of studies code would help me in the future. So while my literature review has moved away from volunteer tourism, it still helps me because if I double click definition here and open the code, I can see all of the different times that I've coded. Again, it's exact same as opening the Stripe, and you can see I've actually coded a lot of definitions here. So they tend to be below the age of 35. There's that number again, 1.6 million. Then we have the wearing definition, which is probably used the most, but I only realized this because I had it coded so many times here. So the youth of today, two different types. It's risen. And then a bit more about what volunteer tourists do. So the proportion of time, there is no fixed definition. Here we go, we have wearing again. Yeah, so you can see how a definition code might actually really help you if it's something like this, where a lot of different people have slightly different perspectives on what it is, and it's not just a dictionary definition. So keep that in mind. And then again, the scope of studies. So scope of studies, this one has 50 different references for 26 files. So a fair bit of coding, as you can see here as I'm scrolling. So I like to look at this scope of studies one, sort of like a little cheat towards how other people are viewing the field. So in 2017, these people have said future studies need to do this. So that's basically allowing you to sort of see where other people think the gap is. And again, while more has been written, this continues, blah, blah, blah. Scroll down. So the existence of growing body of literature criticizing. Um, there has been no knowledge to my work done on this. Current literature has focused on this. Still not fully understood. So here, this is probably one of my more descriptive and larger codes, and it is allowing me to see at a glance. Obviously, I'm going to spend more time than what I've just done, scrolling through and seeing what people think is the gap and what people think is currently being studied a lot and what people think should be studied. A lot of the time, this is in the literature review of your articles, but this really saves me from having to look at 50 articles and trying to figure out where they've said this. So it's definitely something to keep in mind for yourself. And it's always good, I think, if somebody says there's a gap and your study fills it, to reference the person who's saying there's a gap. All right, so I'm not really sure how much more I can cover with codes. So I might show you why this is potentially useful. Because it really comes down to, when you're doing your nodes, is doing things that will help you find things in the future. You're not coding everything, because when you have so much coding, you're not going to want to read it all. The point of this is to flag things so that in the future, if you're looking for something, you'll be able to find it. And which I hope I got across when I was showing you the coding of that article. Because under method, there's obviously some different things that might be of different use compared to a literature review. But you will be writing about your method, and you do want to know which articles you have which write about this method. So obviously you have two ways of doing this. You can code under nodes all of the different things, which is going to be more nuanced than just having your file classification sheet with different methods. So I have here African examples, the art-based method, because I did use interviews and art-based interviews, blog analysis. As I said, some of the things in my NVIVO aren't really useful for me anymore, but I thought they might be. So blog analysis here, we can see it only has one file and 3 references, which means that I've only coded one file to it, and within that file, I've coded 3 times to blog analysis, which shows to me perhaps it's not something I've read much about, and there is a reason for that, because I'm not doing blog analysis. But I initially was concerned about timing of my project, and I had about 10,000 backup plans, and I thought that maybe one day I might have to do blog analysis, so that is why that is there. Case study, child participation research, co-researchers, criticisms, ethics. So this isn't so much about ethical dilemmas, it's more about like consent, giving back. So I actually recorded here which studies talked about giving back. So this one talks about giving back. This one talks about how they felt they were exploiting, and payment, which is much more specific. So this was about payment. So students got notebooks. So again, a good way. These aren't necessarily signposts like I would use for my literature review. They're actually just what other people have done, which is what I tended to do in my methods notes, rather than sort of using it as a flag to follow up in the future. So we'll just close these. And here you can just press close all, handy little trick. And then data analysis. So again, not something I've used a lot, but just you can see not many files coded there, but just some things that might help me in the future when I'm writing about these ideas. And I think In terms of the literature review, I think it's just important to remember you don't want to be necessarily coding every sentence in a document because it's going to make it overwhelming when you come to write your literature review. Or whilst you're writing a literature review, you want it to just be things that allow you to get the overall idea of the article or the the main arguments or the ways of talking about the field. An example of this is under theoretical framework, I believe I have under colonialism. I have 46 different files, so it's a lot, and 112 references, so a lot of coding. And here for me, this one isn't so much about flagging for future, it's more about looking at the ways that people talk about it. So I was really wanting to make sure that I was getting the language of my field right. So I would highlight different places that people have talked about colonization and the ways that they talk about modernity and things like that. So that is why I have so many different codes under this one. It's because I really just wanted to get a clear idea of the ways that people and the words that people were using. As to me, that was really important. So you just basically need to make a decision when you're making your notes, whether it's going to be something that gives you an indication of the way that people talk about it, or whether it's going to be a flagging for future follow-up, and just try and keep that consistent. And as I have sort of shown you throughout, my NVIVO file isn't perfect, and it really is up to how you want to do it. So you need to think about the potential themes that you think you might find in your literature or the things that you think are important. And I would start by creating your notes that way. All right, so now back to the classifications. Why did we bother doing that, and why would we bother coding all of this in NVIVO when we could potentially just have a Word document which has different codes, different quotes from articles underneath it? Well, so under the query tab, one thing I have used sometimes is matrix coding. So matrix coding might be best if I just run through one and I can sort of show you what it is. So matrix coding is going to create a intersection of the things that we tell it to. And this is where it really comes to me saying that you are in the driver's seat. You need to know what you're looking for. So you can choose where to search. I generally just choose files and externals because I have separate codes for my literature review, so I'm not going to end up mixing data and things like that. So we just click, and this will look different, I think, on Windows, but the same principles apply. Just click plus here, and then we're going to select items. So for this, I'm going to be looking for the intersection of codes, or nodes, sorry. I want to look in a different way. I want to look for where, say, my volunteer tourism articles intersect with certain theoretical nodes that I have. So we might click volunteer tourism and then tourism as field and philanthropic tourism, maybe even cultural tourism and alternative tourism. Select them, and then these are going to be our rows, which we'll see in a minute. And then we're going to select some other nodes. So theoretical framework, I'm going to choose all of these because I am interested in all of the intersections, and this is going to come up with a fairly big table, but it's all right. I'll show you how we can sort of manage this. All right, so I've selected them, and then we will run our query. All right, so as you can see, it's a fairly big table, lots of zeros, because this is looking for the intersection of these codes. So it's looking for places where volunteer tourism was coded with images of Africa. So a way to make this a little bit clearer is to go to View up here on your View ribbon, click Node Matrix, and then choose the shading. So you can choose blue or white, and it will show you in blue or white which ones have been the numbers, and then red, yellow, green. So green 0, or the opposite, green, yellow, red. So red is where there is 0, and green is where there's more. For example's sake, I'm just going to click on the intersection of volunteer tourism and images of Africa, double click it. And then here it's opened up everything where it's been coded as images of Africa and volunteer tourism. So there isn't actually that many where they intersect in my data. And again, this comes back to how you were driving it. So I obviously wasn't driving this very well. It didn't really show me what I wanted it to, and in the future, I'd probably have to think a little bit more about the nodes that I was choosing to look at the intersections between. But because it was just an example, I just quickly clicked some where I knew there would be at least some crossover. And you can see how this might be a useful tool, but you do have to be careful with it. So you can export. But I don't really know why you would want to, because in a literature review, unless you're doing a scoping review where you know that you have all of the articles that could possibly be, and you're looking for the numerical count, you're not really looking for tables like this in a literature review. So this is only really good if you are like looking for cultural tourism and images of Africa, and you just really want to see where your articles intersect. So you might say, okay, I've got three, so I'm going to really look at these three articles and read them in depth for that section of my literature review. And this is why, again, it comes back to you driving it. You need to know which of the nodes you're interested in and which ones you're interested in seeing intersections between. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So this is why when I say that NVIVO doesn't do your analysis for you, I'm hoping you can begin to see that. All right, so another way that we can query things is we can choose our attributes. So this comes back to the classification sheet that we made before. So we might like to choose the focus of the article. I might choose volunteer tourists. Perhaps, let's see some other. NGOs, race, tourism, capitalism. Just trying to pick some tourism ones. Maybe tourist gaze, and I'm holding down command as I do this so that they continue to all be highlighted, so I can select multiple. Shallow, deep volunteer tourism, and let's just select those. So this is now all of those things that I used before in the classification sheet, and then we will select some nodes. So let's just go. So again, I'm trying to look here for theoretical framework and where my chosen theoretical framework lines up with any of these attributes of the articles. So we're probably actually going to find more intersections here. So I might just click those and then run it. Might take a bit more time, we'll see. All right, so again, we don't have heaps of results here, and I'm driving this very badly in my examples, but it does just show like you really actually need to consider what you're looking for. So this is, when we have these here, it means that any of the articles I have chosen as the focus NGOs, so we can see here I've got one intersection with Foucault where I've coded, so it's just that one little thing, which really doesn't show us much, but it does suggest to me perhaps we can have a look at this article by write out and see what they're talking about. So there are options, and you really do need to know what you're looking for and a very specific purpose. Otherwise, those reports aren't really going to tell you much at all. There is another way that we can query things, and it's crosstab. So crosstab is just for your classifications, so reference, and we can choose. So I might look at focus of article, maybe location, and then we can do them against nodes. So it's sort of like what I just did. Let's just choose some. Again, if you're actually doing this properly, you would take into consideration what you're actually looking for. We can run query. taking a lot longer this time. Another example of why you should know how you're driving your computer and your project and not just clicking random things like I just was. My computer just crashed. So yeah, be careful, I guess. I didn't lose anything. But yeah, you really have to be careful with the things that you're running and not just clicking random things. So we're going to continue trying to run this crosstab query. Hopefully it's going to work this time. We'll see. I did it yesterday, so it should be working just fine. So we're going to just click a few of these this time, maybe 5. And then, so here I've got a whole bunch of things related to development, and I decided that perhaps I want to look under reference and the attributes. Maybe I just want to look at the theoretical framework and see which ones, which nodes are under theoretical frameworks. I'm just going to run and hope it doesn't crash. Did this yesterday. This is better. So that's how quick it should have been. Maybe my computer was just having a moment. All right, so here we can again see the intersection of these attributes with the nodes. This time, however, it does show us totals. So the total of each column, of each row, pretty cool. And again, we can double click and open it and it will show us where these things have been coded against that attribute. So pretty similar actually to the matrix coding that we just did. But there is some other features like you can use cases which are to do with your participants, which I will show you in the next section. So oh, and we can see again the different colors. You can look at row percentage, column percentage. Yeah, so it's basically sort of what we were doing before. But this time we can look at percentages. Yeah, so really up to you. So like for me, numbers aren't that useful to do with this, as I don't really think that literature reviews should be quantitative. Mine's much more about the themes and writing about the themes, not so much the amount of articles that I have found. Yeah, so I will also just show you, yeah, keep that in mind. Another feature up here is the text search, meaning we can find any text across our files. Could be useful if there's an article that you just can't remember who wrote it, but you can remember something very specific about what was in it. So word frequency, I mean, I don't necessarily use this, but it could be a good way for a presentation, something like that. So you can choose minimum length, and it's going to create a list of the 1,000 most frequent. We're going to only select articles, so selected items, or selected folders, sorry, items and selected folders. We're just going to click articles so that it takes a little less time. And I don't need my participants' data to show up here. It's going to run. All right, so that has run. As you can see, tourism is a word that appears quite frequently in my files, 26,000 times, but it's only at 0.62%. So you can kind of see how this isn't super useful. I mean, 0.6%, it's not a big percentage. We're going to press word cloud, and look, we have a fancy word cloud, which sort of shows what my project is about. So tourism, development, children, education, Zimbabwe, African, those sorts of things. So it is a pretty fun tool. Not really sure how you'd use it for a literature review, but it is good to keep in mind. Just close this so my computer does not have a meltdown again. So these are basically all of the tools that I use. This is a fun one. I don't use it, but I know some people like it. So compare nodes. I think you can only choose 2 here, so I'm just going to click volunteer tourism, and let's say, again, I'm trying to think smartly here. Let's click post-colonialism. So you just press command again, select. So this is a lot of fun, and it has come up crazily because this is to show the comparison here we go, create a comparison diagram to compare two files, nodes, or cases. So if I can just zoom in here, I'm not sure how I zoom, here we go. It is now showing me, and this is why you've got to learn how to drive it. I clicked volunteer tourism and post-colonialism, which both have a lot of files coded to them, but only 3 of them intersect. So this is a very good way also, I guess, to look at the intersections between 2 nodes visually. So I can see here, there's only 3 of mine that intersect. And then if we scroll out, there's so many that don't intersect. Not super useful for me beyond the fact that I can see these 3 that intersect. And if we double click, I can look at the file, etc., with its coding. So keep that in mind. A lot of NVIVO, you can double click and open the linked file or the linked code. To play around, just try clicking things and seeing if they open the files. We can also say compare files. Now, I will try and choose 2 here, which I think might have things in common. So I'm just going to choose 2 from the same author. So in the hopes that that you will have something in common. So here we go. And they don't. Let's try again. Again, it's all about driving. Currently, I'm driving this very badly. I'm trying to think of somebody who I have several articles of that are coded. Another problem I had was my computer. I went through from about May of 2017 until about July. I spent a lot of time coding all of the articles in my NVIVO, and then my computer died and I lost my whole NVIVO file. My last backup had been from about June, so I lost about 2 months worth of coding, and I haven't quite finished coding all of those old articles. So that's unfortunate, but it's the way it is. So here we go. We have 2 files here, which are by the same author. We can see they actually don't have that much in common, so perhaps they were for different journals or they had different focus. So this one, it's got ethics, observation, practical considerations, child as researcher. This one, they both have in common. They talk about neocolonialism, and this one talks about data analysis. So not that much in common. But if you had 2 articles that you actually knew could have stuff in common, it would be pretty fascinating to use this if you were using it correctly. Hierarchy chart. This is pretty cool. Again, I'm not really sure how you would use it for a literature review, but it could be a good way of looking at it. So it's showing us currently all of the different nodes that I have, and I think the way this works, I'm not 100% sure, is it shows you the amount of coding references. So tourism and these codes have pretty much the same amount of coding in them. And then volunteer tourism makes up a big chunk of my tourism ones. Yeah, so could be a good way of visually organizing it. Sunburst, again, these aren't necessarily tools that you need to use, but I thought I might show you them and walk you through them a little bit in case you find them. I find that NVIVO is a lot about playing and finding out what works for you.